In 1994, a boy stepped off a bus at the Oshodi Bridge with exactly 4,000 Naira in his pocket and nowhere to sleep. 30 years later, he silently owned the very ground the richest men in Nigeria walked on. This is the untold story of the invisible billionaire who bought Lagos. His name doesn't matter, because men like him are not famous. They are something far more dangerous than famous. They are invisible. Lagos does not welcome you. Lagos does not care about your dreams, your hunger, or your mother's prayers over your head the morning you left the village. Lagos looks at you, sizes you up in under 10 seconds, and decides whether to swallow you whole or spit you out. Most people get swallowed. He arrived in Lagos at 19 years old with a small Ghana must-go bag, 4,000 Naira, and a burning, irrational belief that the city owed him something. It didn't. The city owed him nothing. His first week, he slept under the bridge at Oshodi. Not beside the bridge, under it, on flattened cardboard with 12 other men who all had the same story. Left the village, thought Lagos would be different. Found out Lagos is Lagos. By day 3, the 4,000 Naira was gone. He didn't panic. That was the first unusual thing about him. While other men wept or called home begging for a return fare, he sat still and he watched. He watched the traders who had stalls. He watched the agboros who collected dues. He watched the bus conductors and the pure water sellers and the men who moved between them collecting small fees for nothing visible. And he asked himself one question that would define the rest of his life. Who actually controls the money in this place? Not who has the most of it. Not who spends it loudest, but who controls the flow of it. He spent 3 months answering that question. He hustled in the meantime, carrying loads at Alaba Market for 200 Naira per trip, sleeping in a face me I face you in Mushin where 8 people shared one room and one ceiling fan that worked only when it felt like it. He ate Gary when Gary was available. He ate nothing when it wasn't. But every evening, without fail, he sat in the most chaotic intersection he could find and he studied the system. And Lagos, slowly, reluctantly, began to reveal its secrets. There are laws in Lagos that no government ever wrote down, laws that no court will ever enforce, but break them, and you will not recover. The first law is this. In Lagos, the man who controls access controls everything. It is never about the product. It is always about the gate. He understood this before he could fully articulate it. His first real move was not glamorous. It was not the kind of thing you would tell at a dinner party. He started collecting, not money, not goods, debts. He identified traders in Mushin Market who were constantly short of change at the end of the day. He became the man who always had change, for a small, quiet fee. Within 6 months, he knew the cash flow rhythm of 47 traders. He knew who sold more on Thursdays, who was always tight on the last week of the month, who owed who, and who was too proud to ask for help. He was never too proud. He began to lend, small amounts, structured repayments, no paperwork. His word was the contract. And in a place where official institutions had failed the ordinary man so completely, a man whose word meant something was rarer than gold. His reputation moved faster than he did. By the time he was 22, he had quietly become the most important unofficial banker in his section of Mushin. He wasn't rich, but he was necessary. And in Lagos, necessary is the beginning of powerful. No parties, no designer clothes, no loud phone. He wore the same 2 shirts for 2 years. People thought he was struggling. He let them think it. That invisibility was not accidental. It was strategy. At 24, he made the move that separated him from every other street hustler who understood the game but played it too small. He stopped lending money to people and started buying the spaces where people did business. A small shop in Mushin came available. The owner was leaving Lagos, broken by years of inconsistent customers and rising rent. He paid below the market rate, not because the owner was desperate, but because he had lent the owner's cousin 400,000 Naira 2 years before, and the cousin's debt became the silent negotiating chip that nobody named out loud but everybody understood. That was how Lagos worked. He rented the shop not to run a business from it. He sublet it to 3 traders for a combined fee 3 times his rent. He was now a landlord at 24. Then he studied something most people ignored. He studied supply lines. In a city of 20 million people, every market had goods that moved in from outside. Tomatoes from Kaduna, yams from Benue, fish from the coast. And every supply line had a choke point, a point where the goods had to pass through a specific route, a specific broker, a specific relationship. He started positioning himself at those choke points. It took 3 years of painstaking, patient maneuvering, 3 years of cultivating relationships with transporters, with market association leaders, with the informal gatekeepers who never had official titles but without whose approval nothing moved. By the time he was 27, 3 major food supply lines in Lagos passed through hands that were either his or that owed him a favor. He did not boast. He never boasted, because the man who boasts alerts his enemies before his fortress is complete. The betrayal came from the person he had trusted most, A man he had brought up from nothing. A man he had taught everything he knew about reading markets, about positioning, about patience. A man who had eaten at his table and borrowed from his capital during the early years and been given time to repay when other lenders would have destroyed him. That man went to his competitors. And he didn't just go. He went with information. Detailed information about supply routes, about the informal agreements that held his network together, about the traders who could be peeled away with a better offer. Within 4 months, he lost 30% of his market network. Lesser men would have retaliated immediately, loudly, publicly, with aggression designed to signal power. He did nothing, visibly. Beneath the surface, he worked with a cold, surgical precision that even those closest to him found frightening. He did not try to win back what was taken. He let his betrayer believe the victory was complete. And while his enemy celebrated, he quietly moved into 3 new sectors his enemy had never touched and never considered. He was not fighting to reclaim old ground. He was building ground that nobody even knew was valuable yet. This was the second great law of Lagos that he had learned. Never fight where your enemy expects the battle to be. The economic crisis that swept Nigeria 3 years later did what no strategy could have engineered. It exposed every player who had expanded recklessly, every man who had borrowed to build without understanding the floor beneath the building. His betrayer collapsed inside 18 months. He did not celebrate that either. He simply bought what remained at a fraction of its value and added it to what he already held. In Lagos, every crisis is a transfer of wealth. The only question is which side of the transfer you end up on. By his mid-30s, he controlled or influenced real estate in 6 local government areas. His name appeared on no company registration, no Forbes list, no newspaper profile. Governors came and went. Business tycoons rose and fell. The city reinvented itself every 5 years as Lagos always does. He remained quiet, invisible, immovable. His power was not the kind you could photograph or quote or put on a billboard. It was structural, woven into the economic fabric of the city at such a deep level that removing him would have required dismantling systems that hundreds of thousands of ordinary people depended on for their daily survival. He created jobs, not as charity, but as deliberate architectural design. Every person who depended on his network was a brick in a wall that protected him from the instability that destroyed lesser empires. He understood something that politicians never learn and that most wealthy men discover too late. Loyalty you purchase is rented. Loyalty you create through mutual survival is permanent. The market women who had benefited from his informal credit system for a decade were not employees. They were stakeholders. They did not fight for him because he paid them. They fought for him because without him, the system that fed their children would collapse. That is the kind of power that does not require bodyguards or courtrooms or press releases. That is the kind of power that simply exists, like gravity, invisible, constant, and completely indifferent to whether you believe in it or not. And today, somewhere in Lagos, in an office with no signage and no receptionist and no corporate logo on the wall, that man is sitting quietly, reading numbers, watching patterns, waiting. Lagos is still chaotic. Lagos is still unforgiving. Lagos still swallows the unprepared whole. But Lagos belongs to him. And the most frightening part of his story is not what he built. It is that you will never know his name.